Hi, and thank you for joining me for another short talk. And friends, today I wanted to discuss a very important topic, and that is Mechirat Chametz, or the selling of Chametz or leavened products before Pesach. What fueled me to give this lecture was another talk given by a rabbi who was being interviewed on the topic of Pesach and the preparing for Pesach, which included the selling of your leavened products or Chametz to a Gentile. So, not to be in violation of the Yisur, the Torah prohibition of not having Chametz in your possession. And the rabbi stated that the way we fulfill this mitzvah, this pasuk, is by selling our Chametz to Goyim. And you know what? He said it so nonchalantly. Mind you, the person doing the interviewing was also a Gentile, but you know what? Long story short, this encouraged me to inform all of you, including those rabbis, on the history of this minhag and how it's really nothing to be proud of. And ultimately, this is how it should be presented, not just when speaking to inquisitive Gentiles or even unaffiliated Jews, but you know what? To anyone who takes even the Bible seriously. And friends, like I do with all my videos, I will not tell you how to or what to think, but rather help you think halachically. So the next time you hear something that doesn't sound right from a Torah perspective, you yourself can give a proper response. Because even with Torah, things typically confirm the obvious or are wrong. So to begin with, friends, the Torah tells us to eliminate Chametz from our possession and even from within our borders before Pesach. And Chazal even laid down many examples on how one can do so, right? One can eat it, one can burn it, one could toss it out into the wind. One can even sell it to a Gentile. The idea is to get rid of Chametz from your possession, because the eating of Chametz during Pesach is a very severe infraction, right? More severe than eating many other things identified in the Torah, right? With the exception that at least with Chametz is muter b'chana. That means you could derive benefit from its sale. And friends, anyone who reads Torah straight through, even without rabbinical training, knows how important this mitzvah actually is. So when a Jew is asked what they do with their chametz before entering Pesach, and they simply just say, well, we leave it in our homes and our businesses and just symbolically sell it to a Gentile, especially in a manner that the Gentile knows that it will be bought back after Pesach, you better believe that the Torah is being desecrated. Actually, this is one of the main areas that irreligious Jews use to mock observant Jews. And you know what? Rightly so, and I'll explain how. Look, let me first give you some history on the worldwide Jewish practice of selling chametz before Pesach while it still technically stays in your possession. Friends, the practice, at least how it's done today, is only less than 150 years old. That's right. The Rambam didn't do it, Rabbi Yosef Karo didn't do it, the Amoraim, the Tanaim, the Geonim, Rishonim. Friends, no one did this, right? In other words, our sages did not have as a rule, right, that they would sell chametz to Gentiles as it's done nowadays. To the point that even nowadays it's taught that even if you eat all of your chametz or eliminate it all from your possession, you're still told that you have to sell your chametz to a Gentile. And this is even erroneously called the mitzvah. Look, before I get to the specific halachot that deal with this issue, let me first explain why I'm bothered. And friends, it's mainly because it's asur to make Yahadut, to make Judaism look ridiculous, at least without a better explanation. But anyways, you should be surprised to know that the idea of selling chametz to a Gentile with the possibility of buying it back appears only in one statement by Chazal. It appears once in a Tosefta, and the same statement is later reiterated in Talmud Yerushalmi, and it goes like this. If a Jew and a Gentile are traveling together on a ship and the Jew possesses chametz, when the 5th hour on the 14th of Nisan arrives, he should sell it to the Gentile or give it to him as a present. He may return and buy it back from him after Pesach as long as he gives it to him as an outright present. This is one girsa, i.e. one version of that Tosefta. However, the oldest version is one commented on by Rav Amram Gaon that adds this to the end of that Tosefta. It adds that all this is on the condition that he, the Jew, should not use this in a deceitful or in a way to deceive. And on this, Rav Amram Gaon comments that this refers to those who make it an annual habit of just selling and repurchasing their chametz from Gentiles, i.e., what's done today. And you know what? This Tosefta is just quoted verbatim by the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, and they really just leave it there with the exception that the Beit Yosef, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, states that one who performs such a sale, he can't keep the chametz in his possession, i.e., it has to be a real, actual sale. Actually, the rabbis understood that this statement in the Tosefta was only giving an example of a specific situation where the Jew is stuck on a ship, where if a Jew doesn't try to sell his chametz to a Gentile and then try to buy it back, he won't have anything to eat for the rest of his journey. And for sure, the chametz did not stay in his possession, in the possession of the Jew, i.e., it's speaking about an actual transaction where the goy kept the chametz. In other words, this is basically a bediavad situation and not the norm. Now, compare that with what's done today, where the sale has almost every sign of being fictitious, and even in most cases, the form has a clause within it which states the buyback time. Not to mention that we have another halacha that teaches that we should not give gifts to Gentiles, in this case idolaters, which would then only be allowed if it would be saving the Jew in an instance that it would cause him to violate a greater mitzvah, solidifying the fact that this scenario is clearly not a lechatchila and is clearly really in the realm of it being b'diavad. Now, friends, when did the problem actually begin? And again, we're not talking about just selling our chametz to a Gentile, but what's done today, the prearranged sale and repurchase of our chametz while it stays in our possession. Well, the problem began in the 1600s in Poland, where the Jews controlled the majority of the liquor market, and the transferring of factory loads of liquor into the hands of Gentiles just wasn't plausible. So then the Bach, Rabbi Yoel Sirkis, wrote that although the halacha requires the physical transfer of chametz, in this case it would be more sense to transfer ownership of the factory, in our case, our pantry, to the Gentile. However, he even specified that one must give the Gentile the key to your business if you're going to do this. After this, based on this Bach, people on their own began to sell their own personal chametz to common Gentiles, but you know what? They really didn't even know how to create a halachic sale or a halachic document. And that was only digging a bigger hole for themselves. So the rabbis in about the 20th century stepped in and said that from now on, we have to sell your chametz. We will be your agents. And obviously for a small fee, and make sure that at least the transaction is halachically sound with kinyanim and the whole 9 yards. That really leaves us where we are today. And mind you, this minhag, really a minhag shtus, in my opinion, is growing with people not only just selling chametz, but even now selling their dishes like Chabad teaches, or even selling items that are not chametz to begin with, like kitniot items, or items that just don't say kosher lePesach, but are not really chametz. In other words, the creation of humrot opens the door for weird kulot, for weird leniencies, like feeling obligated to sell your chametz, not to suffer financial loss, because now the rabbis have made everything chametz. Not to mention that today you're almost forced to accept this custom of selling and buying your chametz that stays in your possession, because there is another halacha that teaches that one cannot consume chametz that was kept by a Jew during Pesach. So if you don't buy into this notion of selling your chametz, where are you going to do your kosher shopping? Because all kosher markets today sell their chametz to goyim while keeping it in their possession. So really, you're forced to be an accomplice. And friends, just, remember the pasuk. It says that there shouldn't be any leaven found within you, even within your gates, within your borders. But you know what? It really boils down to the fact that when you're machmir, when you're strict in one area, it creates a kula, a leniency in another. Like we said, when you expand the definition of chametz to include even kitniot and things that are not really chametz, it forces you to adopt further leniencies that you previously wouldn't have adopted. In other words, before people started classifying everything that was not labeled kosher lePesach chametz, people would just eat their actual chametz before Pesach, and there wouldn't be a need, there wouldn't be a problem to have to sell and then repurchase your chametz from a Gentile. I mean, actual chametz, a kazayit's worth, an olive size worth, which is really what you should be trying to eliminate, not just anything that happens to have even a grain of chametz. But you know what? All this being said, I have to be truthful and tell you that I also sell my chametz. Honestly, one is almost not considered from if he or she fails to do so nowadays. And yes, you can forget about having any guests over for Shabbos if you don't. Look, the truth is that we break halachot daily, like the fake eruvim, which are about 98% of eruvim of Arabs worldwide. So even the listening of music that halakha prohibited since the Churban, since the destruction of the temple. Now, that's not the issue, friends. It's the intolerance and the haughtiness displayed by people who violate all these things and still have the audacity to exclude someone else from Jewish life because they don't do things the way they do. And you know what? I also utilize the fake eruvim like 95% of the Jewish world does. And I listen to music and like I said, I even sell my chametz. But hey, I acknowledge I'm not perfect, and that striving just to be a decent person, in my opinion, in this day and age, is understandably almost good enough. Because the issue is not the fact that we're not perfect, but the hypocrisy that we still propose to walk around thinking that we do what Chazal did and endorsed, and anyone who does something we're not familiar with is a heretic. Instead of acknowledging that things are not always as they should be. But what we shouldn't do is continue making Jewish life impossible to live, all under the guise of better safe than sorry. And just realize that if it was not established by Torah or the Sanhedrin, it's only a non-binding custom and can be disposed of by a community as quickly as it was adopted or created. The thing is that a sense that we have perfected one aspect of ourselves, or in this case of Jewish law, just opens up the door for us to assume that life is not difficult enough for Jews, and it makes rabbis create more baseless humrot, baseless stringencies to make our lives even more difficult. Like the vast majority of Jews today on Pesach deciding not to eat kitniot, or worse, not to eat gebrux. In other words, it's humbling to know that, you know what, we stumble, but what we shouldn't do is invent frivolous customs to make us feel more religious, which is why the easier things get for Jews in society, the stricter the rabbis get. Why? Because when you don't have an evil to fight, you manufacture one. Unless you actually just backtrack and think about all you haven't been keeping properly. But the truth is that if people just kept the plain halakha, Jewish life would be about 90% simpler. So, what should we do? Friends, the truth is that you should be consuming or eliminating any actual chametz from your possession. And this also includes selling it, but it cannot be left in your possession. And that's pretty much all I have to say on this issue. And friends, be sure to catch my other lecture on cleaning for Pesach, on how Chazal, our Mishnaic sages, right, the way they cleaned for Pesach was only what we call Badikas Chametz nowadays. And friends, for more information about everything Jewish, please visit TorahJudaism.org. Thank you.